Welcome back, everybody. In the last video, we set up our tab bar and our navigation stacks. Our app, the root of our app is starting to come together. In this video, we're going to finish up that flow, and we're going to actually handle the logic for moving from the onboarding flow into the tab bar of the application. And then we're going to log out and move back to the onboarding flow. Before we begin though, I keep getting that error that I was talking about in the last video where Xcode is making changes and then it says revert those changes or save those changes, and it's super annoying. I was not getting that when I was building with this setup in Xcode 15. I'm getting it in Xcode 16 now. So what I'm going to actually do, I'm pretty sure it's because of the Swift lint. So let's jump into the project navigator, go to our build phases, and I think it's because we have the automatic fix on. If we just get rid of that automatic fix, then it should not be allowed to automatically update our files. So I'm just going to cut that. And I'm just gonna make it a comment in here for now, just so that I have this code for later. Maybe I'll run it once when I finish the project. But this will be allowing Swift lint, but not allowing it to automatically modify our project. And I think that will fix the problem going forward. Command-Shift-K. All right, so let's jump into our welcome view. This is where we're gonna start now. And what we're gonna do is just basically build out, we're not gonna build out the whole UI here, but we're gonna add a button. And we're going to go to the next screen in the onboarding flow. Our onboarding flow is going to have a bunch of screens. So we're going to have probably 4 or 5 screens. But for this video, I'm just going to move us from this screen to the last onboarding screen so that the last onboarding screen is going to have the logic to then move into the tab bar screen. Let's start with updating the welcome view here. I'm going to make a VStack. And below it, let's put a navigation link on the screen with a destination and a label. The destination, let's just put onboarding completed. And then the label, let's put some text here and we'll say get started. This will be our big call to action button on the welcome screen. Let's add a little bit of UI for this button. So I'm going to add a font of headline. Let's give it a foreground style of white. And I'll give it a background color of .accent. I love the new Xcode completion shows us the color in this completion here. It's really nice. And then before the background, let's give us a frame with a max width of infinity, as well as a frame with a height of 55. After the background, we'll add a corner radius of 16. And yes, I know corner radius is deprecated, but I am protesting that Apple deprecated the corner radius. Using clip shape or fill is so much more annoying in my mind, so I'm going to keep using corner radius until it is no longer allowed. You guys can protest with me if you want. I will not tell anybody, I promise. All right, let's push this to the bottom of the screen. So let's just give this a frame with a max height of infinity. This is at the bottom. And then on the VStack, let's just maybe give it some padding of 16, just to push it out from the edges. Cool. When I press play here, it should push to the next screen. Let's go ahead and start building out that screen as well. So our onboarding is going to have a bunch of screens, and this will be the last screen in onboarding. So let's come up to our core and create a new folder, and let's call this onboarding. Inside the onboarding folder, I'm going to create another folder and call this one the completed view. And then let's right click and create a new file, Swift UI view. And I will call this the onboarding completed view. Let's click create. I'm going to go back to the welcome view. And so now we're getting these warnings from Swift lint because it's not automatically fixing these extra spaces, which is a little annoying. Maybe we'll turn back on the fix in a little bit. But for now, let's just take this VStack and copy it and put it in the onboarding completed view as well. And this time, instead of saying get started, we'll say finish. We'll be finishing the onboarding view, and this will no longer be a navigation link but a button. And then the action of this button, we're going to finish onboarding and enter app. Let's call this onboarding completed. Before we move forward, you will notice that we now copied these modifiers twice already. This call to action button we're going to use across our entire application time and time again. It's going to be a very common button, our call to action button. So we want to make a reusable view modifier so that I can reuse it and not have to copy and paste this code all the time. I'm going to come down here and create an extension of view. And let's create a func called call to action button. It's a function that returns some view, and open the brackets. And it's going to return self, the view as is, with all of these modifiers. Paste them here. All right, and then on this text finish, we'll call that call to action button. And then this call to action button, let's go to our welcome view, and we'll delete this code as well and use our call to action button view modifier here. Let's go back to our onboarding completed view, and I'm going to move this view into this extension into its own file. So outside of the core, I'm going to create a new folder here. Let's call this extensions. And inside this extensions folder, let's create a new empty file, and I'm going to call this the view plus ext. So for my view extensions, let's import Swift UI, and then let's just copy and cut and put our code in here. If you're unfamiliar with how to make reusable view modifiers, I will post a link in the description below of a video on my YouTube channel explaining all about custom view modifiers and how we can make even more complex things than just this. I am noticing as we do this that we are getting all of these Swift lint errors now, or warnings, because we don't have the fix on. Every time we have these extra spaces, Swift lint is yelling at us, and this is going to be across our entire app now. So as a solution to turning off the fix, what we're going to do is turn off this. We're going to disable this rule just for now, and we'll turn it back on at the end of our project. So the trailing whitespace rule is one rule that we want to disable. Let's jump open. Let's right click on the navigator, show finder. Again, this is the Swift lint YAML file that we made. Let's open it with Xcode. And then in here, I'm just going to also paste disabled rules trailing whitespace. And let's save that. I will paste this in the video description as well, so you guys have it too. And then this is how we can disable rules completely rather than just modifying them. So cut this. And if I build my app right now, these rules should go away. Awesome. And we have one other warning, which is the run script will run every build because it does not modify any outputs. Uncheck. Okay, so now let's go back into our project navigator and uncheck based on dependency analysis. So we can, I think that will get rid of that final error as well. That's gone. All right, moving forward, let's jump back into our application here. Welcome view. We can now move to the onboarding completed view. So let's click and we go into here. And then from here, we can finish and we should go into our application. So let's work on that part next. So how are we going to move from here into the application? Well, in our app view, we already set up this logic for show tab bar view. And all we need to do is set this to false to move into the core app. So what I could do, one approach, would be dependency injection. We can take this, we could pass it directly into the welcome view. And then from the welcome view, we could then pass it directly into the onboarding completed view. And that works. And that's what dependency injection would tell us to do. But you could imagine if we have a bunch of onboarding views, it's going to get really annoying to have to pass this binding from view to view to view to view and all the way through our application. But luckily we are actually in a Swift UI environment. So what we can do instead is put this into the environment, and then in the completed view, we'll just pull the current value out of the environment and then update it in the environment. So in order to put an object into the environment, we need to make it an observable class. So the .environment either accepts, we no longer use environment objects, just a reminder, we now use the environment. So either an environment value, which is some sort of sendable type, or we can put an object, which is what we want, which is something that conforms to observable. So let's do that approach. We're going to come up here and we're going to create an app observable. Let's create a class and call this our AppState. It'll be the root app state for the whole application, and it will basically just hold a variable for show tab bar. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in here, a variable called show tab bar. I will make it a private set so that we can only update it from within this class. And then while we're at it, let's create a function to update the view state. We'll pass in a parameter called show tab bar view of type bool, and we'll set show tab bar equal to the passed in show tab bar view. And then while we're at it, when we created this app view, we updated the init so that we could pass in a value. And I also want to update the init of this class to pass in a value. So let's pass in a value here for show tab bar, and then we can get rid of this default value here. The last thing we want to update is this app storage was going to save this value so that it persists to user defaults. But app storage is a SwiftUI view property wrapper. So because this is not a view, we should not be using app storage. Instead, we want to use user defaults directly. So every time we set a value for show tab bar, let's do a did set. We'll just set the user default dot standard dot, let's set show tab bar, the value for key, and we'll pass in the same key that we were using here. And similarly, when we load up show tab bar, if we don't pass a value in, we want to load it from app storage like we were doing before. So in here, we'll set the default value equal to user defaults dot standard dot boolean for key, and this will be the key. Before we move forward, let's actually clean up the user defaults code now. I'm not a fan of having to write this key twice, and this seems a little clunky to me. So what we're going to do is actually create an extension of user defaults and open the brackets. And I'll make a static variable called show tab bar view of type bool. And the show tab bar view will have a getter and a setter. And we're going to use this exact same logic that we have here. So the getter is standard.bool. We don't need to call user defaults because we are already inside it, so we'll pass that here. And the setter is the exact same as well. We'll pass that here. The value that we're going to set is the new value that we pass in when we set it. And lastly, I don't want to risk that I typed the key wrong between here and here. So let's just create a reusable variable for both of these. In here, I'm just going to create a private struct, and I'm going to call it keys. And let's create a static let, and we'll say show tab bar view, and we'll set it equal to this key here. So now we can just call keys.showTabBarView, and I'll paste that twice. So now from our code, we'll call userDefaults.showTabBarView, and then from here, we'll say userDefaults.showTabBarView equals showTabBar. There we go. Just a little bit of a cleanup there. And the last thing I want to do is just move this to its own file. So I'm just going to cut this, and let's click over here in the app view section, and we'll just paste in the app state. So now we have our own file. Let's import SwiftUI, and there is no preview for this file because there is no UI for this file. This is just going to be our app state, which is very simple, Boolean. Every time we set show tab bar view, we save that to user defaults, and then we load up our app. We're going to pull it from user defaults, and we have one method to update the value for true or false. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory here. Let's jump back to our app view. Instead of this, let's use our new observable object. So I'm going to create an @state private var. Let's call this AppState of type AppState, and we'll set it equal to the a new version of AppState. And let's go ahead and delete this. And actually, if we don't make it private, we can then pass in a new version. So we can do an app view here with an app state. And here I can pass in true. And then I can copy and paste that here and make this one false. The show tab bar view is going to now become appstate.showTabBar. And I think that should work. Looks like that compiles, and it looks like that compiles. Great. So now that we have this app state, we can put it into the environment. Let's call .environment, and we'll add the app state. All right. And before we move forward, I want to jump into our FigJam diagram real quick. So we're adding this app state to the environment of our application. So it's not outside the app view, but it is outside the tab bar view and outside the app welcome view. So if I look at our diagram quick, it's going to look a little bit more like this now. So if this is the app view and this is the tab bar view, we now have this environment where any of these views can access that object, but the parent views above it cannot. If I was to put the environment maybe on just the tab bar view, our circle would look more like this, where it's just covering these views here. But we're putting it on the whole screen so that all of these views, both modules, have access to the app state. Later, when we get into the complex parts of app architecture, we're going to actually remove some of this so that the entire application does not have access to things like this. That is pretty far away from where we are at this point in our code. So right now, we just have this entire environment set up here. And let's jump back into our code base. Let's put the environment on the entire app. So now we can go into our onboarding completed view where we finish onboarding, and I can pull the app state from the environment. So let's do an @environment, and this will be the app state.self. Let's create a private variable, and I'm just going to call this the root because this is kind of the root app state, if you will. So when we click this button, we're going to perform some action. So down here, let's create a function and let's call this onFinishButton. And then here we're going to do some other logic to complete onboarding, which we will set up in a future video. And then we're going to call root.update view state show tab bar view is true. And we're getting an error in our SwiftUI preview here because we don't have the environment object in the environment of this preview. So let's just add here a .environment object, and let's add a app state object. So this should now work. Let's call onFinishButton pressed from our button. And if all goes well, we should now be able to actually move into our app. So let's test that out in the simulator because we can't, if we click it here, nothing's going to actually happen. But let's see if the simulator works. So I'm going to go to the root of the application, which is this app.swift file, which we have not used yet. I'm going to move this app.swift file into the core folder, actually. So we have it down here. And then I'm going to delete my content view because we're not going to use that anymore. And the first view in our app is going to be the app view, which we created a while back. Let's build and run this to a simulator and see what happens. Cool. So we have not logged in yet. Welcome. Get started. We go to our onboarding completed view. And now if we click finish, we should go right into our tab bar. Awesome. This is looking good. And if I close and open the application, we should be still in our tab bar view because we set up that user defaults and it persists that we are still in the core app. Before we wrap up this video, let's now go into the settings view and add a button here to go back out to the home view. So let's just go look at our profile view real quick. We have the text for settings view. Let's create an actual settings view quick. In our core, let's create a new folder called settings. In that folder, let's create a new file from template, and a SwiftUI view will be the settings view. Let's click create. When we show the settings view from our profile view, we're showing it through a sheet. Because we are popping up a new sheet, we actually are no longer in this parent navigation stack. So when we get to this settings view, we can add in another navigation stack. Because again, reminder, sheets and full screen covers enter a new environment. So in here, let's create a navigation stack. The view for this screen will just be a simple list. And for right now, I'm just going to put a button quickly, and that button is going to have some, let's do action and label. The label is going to say text sign out. And then down here, let's create a function called onSignOutPressed. Open the brackets, and let's pull from the environment our AppState.self private var AppState, and let's add an @state to our environment down here, AppState. And then on sign out press, we're going to call AppState dot not show tab bar, but update view state. Show tab bar is then going to become false. Let's put it in a reminder here, do some logic to sign user out of app. And then we should go back to the root view of the application. On the list, let's just put a nav title quickly called settings, and we'll fix the UI of this screen later. Let's just call sign out pressed from our button right here. Cool. Let's build and run this to a simulator quick. Let's jump to our profile view, open up our settings, looks good, and let's sign out. And this should push us back to the welcome view. Cool. All right, let's wrap up this video by just committing our changes. Option Command C, feature, let's say add app state. Stage all, commit, and let's push to GitHub. And actually, I'm going to go through this one more time. I'm noticing as I edit this that the animation, it animates into the tab bar, but when I click and I sign out, the animation kind of disappears. And I think it's because we have that sheet showing above our actual tab bar view. So let's fix that animation. Let's just tweak it real quick. I'm just going to actually dismiss the sheet before we call update view state. So in here, let's pull in the @environment. Let's do \dismiss key, and we'll make this a private var called dismiss. This is just the native way to dismiss screens in SwiftUI. When we click sign out, we're going to actually call dismiss, and then let's add a quick little delay. So we'll do a task, and let's do try await task.sleep. Let's sleep for maybe, let's do 1 second, and then we will switch back to the onboarding flow. I think this will make the UI a little bit better so that the sheet dismisses and then the animation happens back to the screen. I'm going to build that really quickly and let's check it out. So we have the animation into the tab bar, and now we can put up the settings screen, dismiss the sheet, and then animate back out. Great, and that looks a little bit better. Let's finish this video by Option Command C, feature, and I'll just say fix log out animation. Stage all, commit, and push. See you guys in the next video.